Good morning, class, and happy Friday to you. I hope you've had a great week, and I hope you're looking forward to a great weekend. If you're here in the Falls Church area, then I hear the weather is going to be incredible. So, part of me being new at the Department of Social Work at George Mason University is finding out different strategies to help our students. And so, one of the things that I'm going to do. Again, I'm going to have my weekly video on Monday, and I encourage you to submit any questions, preferably by Sunday evening. It'll give you an opportunity to prep for the week, right? You prep for the week, you have your questions, you send them to me, you see the weekly video, and that sort of catapults you into the week. And then you have opportunities for office hours on Monday, right? And so I'm going to try and make sure I get the weekly video out earlier. But then there's another opportunity to connect in person, which is really important. I really love to see, at least say that every student participated in office hours, if only for a few minutes. And then, my last strategy, which is a little bit new, is I said that I would take all questions that I receive after office hours on Monday up until Thursday evening, and then I would share those answers via email. Well, I decided not to do it via email. I decided that video is best. So we're going to have three strategies. One, weekly video Monday. Two, office hours on Monday. Three, a video to close out the week on Friday. All right, so let's get started. The first question is about a research question. Like, what is the research question? And so, when we're talking about our literature review, there are a couple of places where the research question might appear. But let me get to the question, the research question. Every peer-reviewed article has a research question that the author is trying to answer. And it is your responsibility to insert that research question into your literature review, okay? And the best way to do that is to, first of all, introduce your study. So this is, the Rutgers, Don Imus scandal, and the article is by Emmett Gill. In this article, Dr. Gill proposes to explore the question of the role of critical race theory in the Rutgers Don Imus controversy. Okay, you see, I introduced the article, I also introduced the author, and then I introduced the research question. And then the question goes on to say, or do you want to know the main questions the article answered and the purpose, and for the purpose of my paper? Exactly. That's it. You've got it. So each article is going to have research questions. Sometimes that research question is actually a statement, like this article sought to, instead of forming it in a question. So either way is acceptable, but that should be about the second line of your introduction of the article that you're sharing. And there are different ways to do that style in terms of way you introduce your article. Types of intervention. I really don't know how to start this part without repeating the type of study and the methods section. Isn't this just asking the type of experimental data, the type of experiment or data collection? Not quite. Okay, so some of the studies, some of the articles that you look for are going to have an intervention, right? Okay, so for example, what's an intervention study that I've published? Okay, the role of an intensive learning program in the academic achievement of Black student athletes. Okay, so the intervention in that particular study is the intensive academic learning program. If there were some young ladies who were working on their self-esteem, then the intervention might be a series of affirmative, positive, motivational videos. I'll give you a more practical example, right? My intervention for losing weight is to run, okay? Some of your studies are going to have an intervention. Some of your studies are not going to have an intervention. If your study is not an OXO study, and the X being the intervention, and it'll state that clearly in the article, then just simply state that this article did not have an intervention. Okay? All right. I would also like to draw your attention to some conflicting information we've been given for formatting our papers in APA guidelines. I've attached sections of APA. Okay, so basically, I'm not as concerned, I'm not going to count the number of words in your abstract. Okay, if you're give or take 120 words, that's really fine. The title page, the abstract, and the format of the paper are important, but I do want to clarify something. They are not half the assignment, okay? Along with the notice of this video, I will send out a revised rubric. The rubric does not change the composition of the literature review at all, but it does put more emphasis point-wise on the discussion, the conclusion, and the review of the articles. The fact that our rubric says that half the paper is about formatting, I respectfully disagree with you. Someone else wrote in, there should be at least 4 sources for each thing. So my overriding advice in this area is your paper should have a minimum of 7 articles. Now, let's say we're dealing with race and the impact of race on the hiring of football coaches in Division I college football. Okay? And so one of the themes might be fundraising, right? Head coaches need to have the ability to fundraise. Now, 4 of my 7 articles may address fundraising, and that's fine. I might simply state that at the end, 3 articles did not address this issue. This study, and this study. And I'll be specific in saying, Hart, Crowley, and Johnson did not address fundraising when they explored the question of the impact of race on hiring black college coaches. Okay. But then when I talk about something like years of coaching experience, and all 7 articles mention that, okay, then I work through that. And then I may have another thing that talks about marital status, because marital status really does impact whether or not black coaches are hired for Division I football teams. And only 6 articles may address that. So you see what I'm saying? And here's the thing about it, class, and I'm going to be really transparent. That is why I encourage you to catch up with Kathy Butler, because a good literature review means that you have found articles that the majority of them address the 3 or 4 themes you're going to explore. And I hope you follow what I'm saying. Like, if the minimum is 7 articles, right, and pretty much for all 3 of my themes, 5 or 6, sometimes 7 of those articles are hitting on that theme, that's a good literature review. And I would be hard pressed, for someone to say, well, when we're dealing with race, that it was hard to find, articles that fit together well, because a lot of the research has to do with race. And I am happy that my colleagues in the field of social work have definitely, they definitely hit many variables with many studies, and I really do hope it contributes to overall what we do as a profession. All right. One question is with regard to themes, can they be combined? Absolutely. Like, if you look at your methods section, and let's say it's a multiple regression study, then more than likely the author has looked at the intersection between, and I'll go back to that question, whether or not a coach has fundraising experience and whether or not the coach is married. They probably looked at that intersection. They probably looked at those 2 variables individually, and they looked at the intersection. Certainly when we think about our intersectionality, right? I'm a black male, Christian, father, son, all of those intersections go into my identity. So when we look at variables in a study, certainly there are going to be intersections there. Okay, and so examining the individual's themes as well as their intersections are important, but the question is, you can't put them together. All right, you don't put them together if your study put them together. So again, if we're looking at those 7 studies, maybe 2 of my studies looked at the intersection between variable A and variable B, and then 5 didn't. Now I want to say this really quickly before I begin to close. There are a couple of questions. One, what is a hypothesis? What is your hypothesis? Like, you had this interest in this area. Why? What was your question? You had this interest in this area. Why? What was your hypothesis? What did you think was going to come about this? What attracted you to it? So like, if I'm looking at the impact of an intensive learning program on the academic achievement of Black male athletes, there's something there. And what I really want to know is if we have these things, if we have, a class that helps them with their reading, if we have a class that helps with their writing, if we have a class that simply is strength-based and encourages them to do well in school, will it impact that? That's what I want to answer. And so in pursuing this literature review, there was something that you wanted to answer, and that should be 1 in your abstract, and 2, it should also be in your introduction. The last thing that I want to say is, it wasn't a question that came to me, but it was based on my review of the drafts. And thanks for the 6 or 7 students who submitted drafts. I hope that the information was helpful to you. At the end of each theme, you need a summary, sort of 3 or 4 sentences, to basically share with me what you got out of that theme. And it could be a couple of sentences, it could be 3 sentences. I would start that paragraph with, in summary, this theme, and then tell me, in summary, this theme, and then tell me basically what those studies that examine that same theme explored. That's really where your comparing and contrasting comes in. Now, some of it's going to come in your writing and do your own thing, do your style. But I want to make sure that you ask yourself at the end of each theme, have I explained to Dr. Gill, have I summarized, the similarities, the differences, and sort of that information? That's critical. So listen, I know this is a lot, but what I hope that you do is sort of like get rid of the anxiety. Just say, you know what, I put in the work, I'm gonna be able to do this. And what I want you to really do is just focus on trying to digest the information. Really trying to put it together, not write a paper. If I were doing this, I would really rely on the matrix. I might scribble it up, I might draw some arrows, I might think around it. You got to, I can't say this enough, how, literature review is just not spitting out the information. You've got to take it somewhere, At the end of your paper, at the conclusion, that's why it's so important to digest this information, because and this is important, your conclusion and your discussion can't be this esoteric, abstract thing. It's got to flow from what you researched above. And a good conclusion and discussion is going to reference that summary. It's going to say, well, the summary around this particular thing was that, and therefore I'm recommending this. And the summary theme up here was that, and therefore I'm recommending this. That is the kind of conclusion and discussion that we'll be looking for. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that those of you who have reached out to Kathy Butler have seen the power of a librarian, and I hope that those of you who submitted a draft, are feeling like you're ahead of the curve and you're going to do big things. I think you're going to do well. I think you got this. Most of all, practice self-care. Have a great weekend. Life is short. Make sure you love those around you. All right, thanks.